a quiet garden, a future king, and a remark no royal could ignore what really happened that forced Prince William to draw the line. Camilla's grandson had it all, until one moment changed everything. Stay with us, because what comes next may surprise you. It all began with a headline that exploded across social media platforms. Prince William strips Camilla's grandson of royal title after shocking incident. The claim, published in June 2025, quickly trended on YouTube, TikTok, and other forums, sparking millions of views within days. Viewers were led to believe that Prince William had taken an unprecedented stand against Queen Camilla by revoking her grandson's royal privileges after a disturbing altercation with Prince George. These dramatic allegations painted a compelling story. The scene was supposedly set at Windsor Gardens during what was meant to be a peaceful family gathering. Children were playing, laughter filled the air, and the calm of tradition rested over the palace lawns. But then, the story claimed, Camilla's grandson began to taunt George in ways that escalated from childish teasing to venomous cruelty. According to the narrative, this included mocking George's royal destiny and even invoking the late Princess Diana in a hurtful remark. The imaginary story ends with George heartbroken, Catherine furious, and William making a powerful decision to remove Camilla's grandson from the royal fold. Despite the emotional pull of the tale, credible media outlets had no record of such an incident. The entire sequence of events was driven not by journalism, but by viral YouTube videos with sensational titles and AI-generated narration. Channels like Investing Mania and the Spotlight List raked in massive engagement by leaning into the public's fascination with royal drama. Fact-checking organizations quickly stepped in. Snopes and Yahoo News investigated the claims in July 2025 and found no credible sources to support them. Neither Buckingham Palace nor Kensington Palace issued any statements, and no British news outlet covered the alleged altercation. The narrative was built entirely on fiction, and its sources were either unnamed or didn't exist. So why did so many believe it? Part of the answer lies in the enduring intrigue surrounding the British royal family. Every gesture, every public appearance is scrutinized and interpreted. Stories of palace feuds, hidden motives, and generational rifts feed the public imagination. When platforms present a polished story, complete with emotion and a touch of scandal, it often gets accepted without question. The false report also tapped into long-standing perceptions of Prince William as a strong, protective father and future king. It framed him as someone unafraid to challenge internal power plays, especially when it came to safeguarding his children. Meanwhile, Queen Camilla has long had a complicated relationship with the public, making her an easy character to cast as an antagonist. The impact of the rumor wasn't just online. It stirred conversations around kitchen tables, in workplaces, and among royal watchers worldwide. Comment sections were flooded with support for William, messages of sympathy for George, and outrage toward Camilla's supposedly scheming family. The hashtag Team George trended, adding fuel to a fire that had no real spark. What's striking is how these videos used production techniques that make the content seem legitimate. Voiceovers with British accents, slow-motion clips of royal appearances, dramatic background music, and even doctored palace images. To the average viewer, it all felt real enough to believe. But what if the real story isn't in the headlines, but in how they're made? Hidden tensions behind royal smiles. In an age where information is one tap away, disinformation travels even faster. Within hours of the fabricated story breaking, millions were already dissecting the imaginary feud between Prince William and Queen Camilla. How did an entirely baseless story dominate the digital sphere so quickly? The answer begins with how modern rumor mills work. Unlike traditional media, which relies on journalistic standards and fact verification, social media algorithms prioritize engagement. Sensationalism gets clicks, and content creators have mastered the art of exploiting this. On platforms like YouTube and TikTok, dramatic titles, emotional imagery, and AI-generated voiceovers are packaged as believable journalism. The original videos that drove the rumor weren't linked to any credible source. Instead, they were created by monetized accounts that specialize in generating gossip-based content around celebrities and royals. Channels such as Investing Mania and the Spotlight List often post speculative or entirely fictional stories to harvest views and add revenue. Their content is dressed in credibility. Thumbnails featuring staged photos, headlines using urgent language, and footage cut together from unrelated royal events. Most importantly, these creators rarely name sources. Instead, they rely on vague attributions like palace insiders or a close royal aide, which are impossible to verify. This technique works because audiences, once emotionally invested, often don't question the origin of the information. In this case, the combination of emotionally charged content and cleverly edited video allowed the rumor to flourish before fact-checkers could intervene. Algorithms then take over. As videos gain traction, they are promoted to more viewers who have engaged with similar content in the past. One click leads to another, and suddenly an entire ecosystem of royal drama unfolds before a viewer's eyes. Related videos appear, new speculations arise, and the fictional story morphs with each new iteration. The virality was further amplified by tabloid-style blogs and pages on Facebook and Reddit. These posts echoed the fabricated narrative, sometimes adding their own twist. In one version, Charlotte was the child being bullied. In another, Camilla's granddaughter was framed as planning an arranged relationship with George. Each variation was more fantastical than the last. What's alarming is how the volume of misinformation began to legitimize it. When multiple unrelated sources repeat the same lie, it creates an illusion of truth. This phenomenon is known as the illusory truth effect, where repeated statements are more likely to be perceived as accurate, regardless of their authenticity. The damage was real. While the royal family remained silent, public opinion began to shift. Hashtags like Tradition Justice for George and Gracias Team Kate trended, with social media users flooding comment sections with praise for William and disdain for Camilla. The emotional core of the fake story, a young boy bullied for his royal destiny, was enough to stir protective instincts in audiences, regardless of the facts. In the vacuum of palace silence, the rumor metastasized. The same lack of response that royal aides have long used as a way to avoid feeding gossip became a liability. For many, silence was interpreted as confirmation. What if the clash between two royal visions was never about titles, but about the soul of the monarchy itself? Let us tell you. William's vision versus Camilla's strategy. Inside Buckingham and Kensington Palace, not all disagreements are loud or dramatic. Many happen quietly, through small changes and polite smiles. As the royal family tries to stay relevant in today's world, two very different ideas have appeared, one from Prince William, the other from Queen Camilla. William, as the future king, wants to modernize the monarchy. People close to him say he believes in making the royal family smaller, younger, and more active in public service. He wants fewer titles and more real work, less tradition, more connection with the public. He believes in values like honesty, openness, and emotional awareness. In late 2024, during a meeting at Balmoral Castle, William shared his plan. King Charles, Camilla, and senior royals were there. William suggested that only working royals, those who do real duties, should represent the family. He wanted people like Catherine and Sophie to have bigger roles. But he wanted fewer events for extended family members who only attend ceremonies. Reactions were mixed. King Charles seemed interested, but cautious. Some agreed. Camilla, however, stayed quiet. She smiled, but people could tell she wasn't happy. To her, this wasn't just about a new plan. It felt personal. It threatened everything she had worked so hard to build. Camilla's path into the royal family had not been easy. For years, the public saw her in a negative light. But over time, through charity work and keeping a low profile, she earned some respect. Becoming queen consort was her proof that she had finally made it. Now, William's plans seemed to push her and her family to the side. Over the years, Camilla had slowly brought her family closer to royal life. Her children, Tom and Laura, began showing up at events. Her grandchildren were seen at charity gatherings and private royal outings. In one photo, her granddaughter walked beside Prince George. Some people whispered that maybe Camilla was hoping for an arranged match in the future. This wasn't against any rules, but it did cross some invisible lines. Palace staff began to notice how often Camilla mentioned her family during press briefings. She made sure they were in photos. Some thought it was just pride. Others believed it was a clever plan to raise their profile. William noticed it too. He didn't speak out in public, but according to royal insiders, he made his feelings clear privately. In his mind, being close to the royals shouldn't automatically mean you get royal status. Only service and hard work should matter. And that applied to everyone, regardless of who they were related to. This difference in thinking created quiet but serious tension. William's push to focus on working royals meant Camilla's family, who are not royal by blood, might slowly be left out of the picture. It wasn't about personal dislike. It was about redefining the values that shaped the future of the monarchy. There were no public arguments, no dramatic fallout, but things started to change. Event invitations, seating charts, and guest lists were adjusted with care and precision. By early 2025, Camilla's family was seen less often at official events. Some titles people expected to be granted were quietly shelved. Her grandchildren were no longer placed near senior royals during photo ops or formal appearances. Behind the scenes, a phrase began to circulate among palace staff and advisors: service before status. It reflected William's evolving approach, and it began to catch on with more people across the royal household. It wasn't just a motto, it was a clear sign of where priorities were shifting. Camilla didn't fight the changes openly. She maintained her grace and composure in public. But according to those close to her, she was privately hurt and frustrated. She had already endured decades of scrutiny and criticism to secure her family's place. Now, just when it seemed like they had finally been accepted, that place was slipping through her fingers, and there was little she could do to stop it. What happens when a child's pain forces a prince to act like a king? Come with us to know. The quiet decision that changed everything. The palace had returned to its usual rhythm, but something in the air felt different. Behind the closed doors of Kensington Palace, a quiet storm had passed through, and it left a clear decision in its wake. It all began after the gathering at Windsor Gardens. The children had returned home, their laughter replaced with tired silence. But Prince George was not himself. He was unusually quiet, distant, and withdrawn. Catherine, always in tune with her children, noticed immediately. She didn't press him with questions right away. Instead, she waited until they were alone in the stillness of her private sitting room. With soft reassurance, she asked him what had happened. Slowly, George opened up. What he described wasn't innocent teasing or playful banter. It was cruel, pointed, and deeply personal. Camilla's grandson had taken aim at George's future as king, mocked his family, and most painfully insulted the memory of his grandmother, Princess Diana. Words meant to sting had landed with brutal force. Catherine listened in silence, her heart heavy. She had seen this kind of quiet pain before in William and in herself. She held George's hand, telling him he was brave to speak up and that he had done nothing wrong. But inside, something sharpened in her resolve. Later that night, when William returned from his own engagements, Catherine shared what George had told her. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Her words were calm, precise, and full of meaning. William listened without interruption, his face growing more still with every detail. This wasn't just a family matter, it was a matter of dignity. A line had been crossed. After putting George to bed, William and Catherine sat together, the gravity of the moment sinking in. William knew what had to be done not just for George, but for the future image of the monarchy. There would be no confrontation, no public reaction, but behind the scenes, he would make sure the royal environment remained safe, respectful, and protected from internal games. The next morning, calls were made. No press releases were issued. No scandals were leaked. But changes began to happen deliberately, quietly, and without delay. Camilla's grandson was removed from future ceremonial guest lists. His name, once included in upcoming royal event programs, was quietly deleted. Invitations that once arrived by tradition stopped appearing altogether. Even seating arrangements at family events were adjusted. Where he once stood beside his grandmother, now the space remained empty or reassigned to more senior royals. To outsiders, it might have looked like a coincidence, but those within the palace understood the message. William had made a decision, and no one would undo it. This wasn't revenge, it was protection. A father had stepped in, not with drama, but with absolute clarity. The privileges once extended to Camilla's grandson were not a right. They were an offering, one that had now been taken back. This move also sent a quiet ripple through the palace hierarchy. Staff noticed. Senior aides shifted their tone. The phrase Team George started to be used not just in whispers, but in the planning rooms and briefing folders. Loyalty within the palace began to realign. William, calm and collected, was no longer just preparing for the throne. He was already leading with purpose. Camilla's reaction remained behind closed doors. There were no public remarks, no obvious retaliation. But she felt it. Her family's growing proximity to the royal spotlight had been halted in a single, wordless move. Years of slow positioning were undone with a silent adjustment. And yet, this was only the beginning, because one quiet act of defense had exposed a deeper conflict about who belongs in the royal circle and who never really did. What do you do when a quiet act of loyalty shakes the very core of the royal machine? Stay with us to know. Fallout within the palace. The decision had been made, but its aftershocks had only just begun. William had removed Camilla's grandson from the inner royal circle without a public word. But inside the palace, the silence rang like thunder. Those closest to King Charles were the first to notice a subtle shift. When he learned of William's move, there was no fiery objection, no royal command to reverse it. Instead, Charles stood still, hands clasped behind his back, staring out the window of Clarence's house for an unusually long time. His aides described his expression as blank, unreadable. When pressed for a response, he simply muttered, "Let him lead as he must." No orders followed. No support was offered. This passivity surprised many. Charles, a man known for valuing loyalty and appearances, had always protected the unity of the family in public. But perhaps even he saw that his son had crossed into a new phase, not just as an heir, but as a leader who no longer needed permission. But Camilla was not so quiet. Behind the thick walls of her private quarters, fury erupted. Aides reported slammed doors, sharp orders, and a voice cracked not from grief, but rage. She had not expected this. The erasure of her grandson from royal spaces was more than an insult. It felt like an attack on her life's effort to integrate her family into the institution. She demanded answers. She accused William of betrayal, of dismantling what she had spent years building. But she received no apologies, no explanations, only silence from Kensington. And from Charles, still nothing. That silence hurt more than William's actions. Within the palace, people started to pick sides. Some long-serving staff, particularly those who had worked with Diana or had seen William grow into adulthood, shifted their loyalty without hesitation. They admired his calm, decisive move. They whispered about the strength it took to act without spectacle. These were not loud declarations, but quiet nods, rearranged schedules, and subtle changes in body language. Team George became more than a nickname. It became a symbol. It represented a different kind of royal strength, one rooted not in bloodline or tradition, but in emotional intelligence, responsibility, and integrity. People began to say that William wasn't just protecting George, he was protecting the future of the monarchy. Other royals noticed the shift as well. Kate was seen more confidently engaging with staff and press. Her presence, always warm but reserved, took on a new sharpness. Sophie, the Duchess of Edinburgh, showed quiet alignment by joining more events with William and Kate. Even Princess Anne, famously direct and fiercely protective of royal protocol, was said to have offered her quiet approval. Camilla, meanwhile, found her usual supporters quieter than before. The press team she trusted offered only careful words. Even some of her senior aides seemed uncertain, watching the winds change and adjusting accordingly. It became clear that the power balance within the family was shifting not with speeches or formal votes, but with body language, seating orders, and attention from the press. The Queen Consort still held her title, but her grip on influence was loosening. Her grandson's absence was only the surface. The deeper wound was the realization that William had acted unilaterally, and it had worked. His authority had gone unchallenged. Palace reporters began noticing the lack of Camilla's family at recent events. They tiptoed around the story in public, but behind the scenes, they knew something had happened. William had made a quiet, symbolic move, and in doing so, reshaped the inner workings of royal power. Tradition had long dictated who stood where, who was allowed to speak, and who simply smiled for the cameras. But now, that structure was bending to something new. Values, protection, quiet strength, the kind that chooses action over noise. What if the next name erased from the royal walls wasn't a child, but someone far closer to the crown? Let's explore that next. The Annabel Elliot chapter. In the days following William's quiet removal of Camilla's grandson from royal life, tension within the palace did not ease. In fact, it deepened. What had begun as a personal boundary set by a father had started to look like a broader shift in the monarchy's internal structure. And soon, the consequences would extend even further into a place Camilla had never expected to see touched: her own sister. Annabel Elliot, Camilla's younger sibling, was not a public figure. She didn't appear on balconies or in photo spreads, but within the royal institution, she had held a respected and steady role for decades. As a key advisor on design and historical restoration, she helped shape the aesthetic and upkeep of properties tied to the Duchy of Cornwall, a massive estate network worth over £1 billion. Annabel had earned her place quietly, often working behind the scenes. But her ties to Camilla had always raised quiet questions. Was she selected for her skills or for her bloodline? While most royal watchers ignored it as harmless nepotism, William did not. Once he inherited the duchy from his father, he initiated a review of all contracts and appointments connected to it. It was part of a new directive: greater transparency, less favoritism, and a more professional structure that matched modern expectations. Within weeks, Annabel's name disappeared from the duchy's books. There was no press release, no headline, no scandal, just silence and the absence of her name on the latest financial report. Those who noticed were stunned. Annabel had been there for years, always in Camilla's corner. Her design firm had been part of renovation projects, heritage restorations, and even private royal residences. She was seen as tasteful, trustworthy, and discreet. But that didn't matter anymore. Not to William. To him, it was a matter of principle. His decision wasn't about punishing Annabel personally. It was about ending a system where proximity to the crown granted permanent access, money, or protection. Even quiet roles, even ones that didn't attract public attention, would now be held to new standards. Some insiders said William had grown uncomfortable with how many non-working royals or relatives had slipped into paid roles or long-standing contracts, sometimes without competitive selection. He viewed it as outdated and potentially damaging to the monarchy's credibility. So, he began making changes. Annabel's removal sent a chill through the palace. It told everyone, Camilla included, that no one was too close to be untouchable. Camilla reportedly took the news with quiet disbelief. Unlike the loud fury she displayed after her grandson's exclusion, this time she said little. But those in her private circle described her as shaken. Losing her grandson's royal access had been painful. Losing her sister's role was a warning shot. This wasn't just about one decision, it was about the dismantling of a structure she had spent years building. Behind closed doors, there was no illusion anymore. Camilla understood that William was not just reacting, he was reshaping. And he was doing it without drama, without public statements, and without asking permission. The new version of royal leadership wasn't loud. It was surgical, quiet, unstoppable. As for Annabel, she did not issue any complaints. She simply stepped back, vanished from the records, and returned to her private life. But her absence was noticed. Her name had once symbolized the quiet reach of Camilla's influence. Now it stood for something else entirely. A signal that the monarchy was being pruned from the inside. This move wasn't about headlines. It was about trust. About telling the public, the press, and the palace itself that legacy no longer gave people a free pass. William's choices were sending a clear message: honor the role, earn your place, or quietly step aside. The ripple effects continued behind the scenes. Other names began appearing on review lists. Other roles were reconsidered. The air within the palace shifted from entitlement to accountability. And yet, while some applauded the clarity, others whispered of growing fractures. Because when you draw new lines of power, you also draw new lines of resentment. How did the monarchy, long known for silence and ceremony, quietly become a mirror of modern compassion? Stay with us to know the crown's quiet shift to compassion. The shift didn't happen with a grand speech or a historic coronation. It unfolded quietly, almost invisibly at first. A seating change here, a name removed there. But beneath it all, something profound was taking place. Prince William was leading the royal family into a new chapter, not through tradition, but through transformation. What began as a private decision to shield his son had sparked a chain of choices that revealed a deeper strategy. William and Catherine, often viewed as poised but conservative, suddenly appeared different in the public eye. Not just as heirs, but as people, parents, leaders, and, most importantly, humans navigating the pressures of legacy with grace. It wasn't lost on the British public. In fact, they responded in waves. Letters flooded the palace, not formal, stiff messages, but handwritten notes, heartfelt emails, and even drawings from school children. Many of them addressed directly to Catherine, thanking her for standing up for her child. Some spoke of bullying. Others simply offered admiration for the couple's quiet strength. What made this response powerful wasn't just the volume. It was the tone. These weren't people bowing to crowns. They were connecting to character. William and Kate, through deliberate but deeply personal choices, had become relatable, understandable, trusted. Public opinion surveys released in spring 2025 showed a sharp uptick in favorability for the couple. Approval ratings surged, especially among younger audiences who had grown disenchanted with the monarchy. Commentators began comparing William's protectiveness to Diana's famous defiance of royal norms. Images of him holding George's hand or Kate reading letters late into the evening began to echo the authenticity people once saw in Diana. Yet, the transformation wasn't about mimicking the past. It was about learning from it. William wasn't trying to be his mother. He was honoring her spirit while building something new, something that could stand in a world far different from the one Diana knew. Camilla, by contrast, began to slip quietly out of focus. Her public appearances were fewer, her media coverage less frequent. Her once confident image started to seem more formal than warm. As William's influence grew, hers dimmed not through scandal, but through shifting relevance. And this time, there was no dramatic fallout, no statement, just a slow, visible recalibration of roles. When Camilla did attend events, she was still respected, still addressed by title, but the eyes of the nation were no longer following her. They were looking at the future. William's idea of the monarchy was no longer centered around ancient titles or inherited entitlement. It was about responsibility, service, doing the right thing even when it's inconvenient, even when it means upsetting the old order. Within the palace, this evolution was quietly recognized. Long-serving aides noted the difference in atmosphere. Younger staff described a new openness in how duties were assigned. Decisions were no longer made solely on tradition. They were made with intention. Kate's role deepened too. Once seen mainly as a graceful presence, she had become a steady influence on the direction of the family's public image. Her careful balance of warmth and reserve, action and thoughtfulness had helped reshape how the public viewed royalty itself. It wasn't about image management, it was about values. When the public saw Kate walking with her children or comforting a nervous young guest at a charity event, it felt real. Because it was. More tellingly, the press began to shift as well. While gossip sites continued to churn speculation, mainstream outlets like the BBC and The Times began writing with a different tone. Less obsessed with scandal, more focused on substance. Editorials described William's decisions not as rebellions, but as reforms. Not attacks, but adjustments. His style wasn't flashy, but firm. Not emotional, but deeply principled. In many ways, William had redefined what power meant inside the royal family. It wasn't about being seen, it was about doing what needed to be done when no one else would. That, it seemed, was the kind of leadership people were waiting for. And as this quiet revolution continued, the monarchy, for the first time in decades, began to feel human again. What are your thoughts on William's bold move and how it reshaped the royal family? Was it overdue or too far? Share your thoughts in the comments.